Hello, my friend. This is Heather. This is the Celebrity Chat Edition where I get to talk to some really amazing humans. And this one is with Silke, and she is down under, but that's not where she's from. So it's exciting to talk to people and where they've gotten around the world and how they got to where they were. And Silke is a grief coach, and she takes a really interesting um, slant on grief and the grieving process. So have a listen. Let me know what you think. I hope you have a great week. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Hi, my friends. Welcome. This is the Back to Me podcast, and this is Heather, and I am super excited that you're here. You are going to hear some tips and some tricks and some ideas to help you live your happiest and healthiest self. I call it Back to Me because when you are taking care of yourself, back to me, then you can take better care of others, and we can all make the world a better place. This is Wellness Your Way, and I am super happy that you're here. Hello, my friends. How are you doing? This is Heather. This is another amazing episode of the Back to Me podcast. This is one of our Friday real life editions. I'm going to start calling them the real life edition because who knows what's going to happen during the podcast. And today I'm talking with Silke Herwald. Did I say it right? I don't feel like I should have an accent when I say it. And your dogs might bark, and that's okay, because that's real life. And we are going to talk about grief to love, which I think, oh my gosh, I remember our first conversation of how important it is for us to recognize that we're grieving, not just people, but things. But first I wanted to understand, like, how did you come into this kind of world of helping people through this?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on your fabulous show. And
Yes.
I absolutely love that it's all real life, because a lot of stuff is so edited, and people then, I think, it sends everybody the impression that everybody has got a perfect life, but only in my life these things kind of happen. No, all these things happen all the time.
Do they
So
ever?
that's why I really love it. So
Thank
thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
And so, yeah, what got me into it? So I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and a master practitioner of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And I've been doing this work full-time for over 13, 14 years now. And when I first opened like a general hypnotherapy practice, I had a client come in and she wanted help with stopping drinking. And she was drinking a bottle, more likely 2 bottles of wine every single night.
Whoa.
She was very functioning, holding a career, doing all of those things. But she said, and every day I tell myself, no, I'm not going to do it tonight. And I come home, and as soon as I walk through the door, I pour myself the first glass. And I asked her, since when has this been a problem? And she could tell me the exact date.
Wow.
And meanwhile, I also learned how to interpret that look very quickly, because her husband had passed away. And so then once she went back to work after her affairs were sorted and the funeral, it just helped her cope. It just helped her numb out, because she just couldn't hack being home in the house by herself. So in that moment, I realized that this poor woman did not have an alcohol problem, but that she had a grief problem. And when by the time she came to see me, it was about 2.5 years later. And then I asked her permission whether it would be okay to also work with the grief in a very appropriate way that allowed her to grieve in her own way, and asked her how she wanted to feel with regards to her husband. And then we got to work. And it was just beautiful to see the transformation, that every time she came in, she was just breathing a little bit easier, holding herself a little bit more upright, feeling a little bit more motivated to just do stuff. And with that, the alcohol just automatically disappeared. And so I was just really fascinated by that. And then I was working online with another lady, and she had a weight problem. And again, I asked, and she said, "Oh, about 20 years." And I said, "Oh, what happened?" And she was like, "Oh, I don't know, just kind of crept on." I said, "What? Did anything happen 20 years ago?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, my mum died, but I mean, that's 20 years ago." Yeah.
Right.
And once again, I realized that grief can just be a great imitator and shows up as lots of different problems. So then I became really, really curious about grief. And I expanded my training and went really deep into understanding grief, especially at the level of the subconscious, because logically we kind of get it. We pretend that everything is okay. We get on with life. We go through the motions, but we still lost a part of ourselves. And that then can show up in all sorts of different things. And so I've been working with grief for probably 8 years, and then my own sister died from cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And then I kind of realized, oh, I knew grief was horrible. Oh, but that's what they mean when they say that. Ew, oh, this is how visceral the pain is. And then of course my parents had lost a daughter, my brother-in-law had lost his wife, and I just couldn't bear the thought, because my sister and I were very close, and I could not bear the thought of losing another one of my people to grief or to depression or to, because I had seen it so many times that people just became completely stuck in the most painful bits of grief, and that then the family lost them as well. And then I kind of got to work and decided that we were all going to be okay. And that kind of worked. And then there was COVID, and then because I live in Australia and my family lives in Germany, so I couldn't see mum and dad because we were in lockdown and nobody was allowed to leave or enter the country and blah blah. And then I got the phone call at 4:00 in the morning that my dad had died.
Oh my Lord.
So and then I jumped on that flight that nobody wanted to be on, really. And my old dog had just passed away 10 days earlier, and it was just a horrible, horrible time. But what it has given me, really, when I came back from that trip, I had to go into 2 weeks hotel quarantine.
Oh, right, because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
A blessing and a curse.
And while I was stuck in a hotel room with my thoughts for 2 weeks, I decided I needed to launch this Grief to Love program, because I realized that, of course, I had all the tools because I had helped so many people, but I realized I still needed help. And that's how all that kind of pretty much started, was hotel quarantine.
And it's interesting that we need those quiet spaces to let our brains process and think. But it's interesting that, like, you already had, not that I would wish it upon anyone and all of those things happening, but it was almost like you were getting yourself ready for them in the years before with all of your clients. Yeah. And that did fortunately help you, I guess, get ready to do your own. I listened to a podcast where he uses an example a lot of, you can know something, like you can know about a broken bone, you can know what it feels like you can imagine what it's like, but you don't actually know what it's like until it happens to you. Yes. And then you say, oh, now I get it. And I think it's important, because it's not always the loss of a person or a loved one that causes grief. Although I do relate, when my grandfather passed away, it's like you find coping mechanisms which you don't even recognize. It's interesting that it was, the client that you had, it had been 20 years, didn't realize that it was just her way of coping. I was 2 years out of my grandfather passing away. I called it emotional incontinence. I thought I was just like, had something wrong with me, that I would randomly have these emotional outbursts. And I actually did go to hypnotherapy for it. And that was a game changer for me. It just changed. I've not fixed because I wasn't broken, but it helped me see and process and come out on the other side with, I still have pictures of him around and I still talk to him all the time,
Yes.
but he has passed away. So
Yeah.
I speak to the energy of him perhaps. But it's hard when you're there and maybe you're alone and you don't know what to do. And I could totally see drinking a bottle of wine and a night to deal with things you didn't want to deal with.
Yeah.
And I guess when I talk about, because I talk about people taking care of themselves, and sometimes all that stuff is just the surface stuff. And so
Mhm.
do you find that there's a way that people come to a realization that it's something deeper, or like they have some kind of sense that it's something deeper, or is it something that you have to kind of help lead them to usually? And it might be both, but
I think all of the above.
yeah,
And sometimes people have an inkling, but they don't want to go there.
right. It is scary.
Exactly. Because also what I find is that more often than not, people don't actually want to stop grieving.
Mm,
They're in this double bind where they feel, okay, I can either remember my loved one and be in pain and grieve and feel like I'm honoring them, or I stop grieving, but that also means I forget them and
oh,
I am moving on, right? Which
right.
nobody wants to move on.
That's
But
the
of course,
languaging, right?
and
Mm,
of course, society tells people, oh, it's been a year now. It is time for you to move on. And of course, the subconscious just goes, I don't want to do that because
right.
that would feel disloyal and wrong in
And
every
you
single way.
lose something if you
Absolutely.
walk away. You lose the richness of that, whatever it was.
That's right.
Which we have to change the language.
That's right. We have to change the language. No more moving on. And I mean, that's also, I think, like my biggest problem with all the traditional grief counseling is that it all goes towards acceptance or letting go. And I'm like, no, I don't. With acceptance, there's something weird in the word acceptance that almost means like I'm okay with it.
Hmm,
And I don't ever want to be okay with my loved ones not being here, but I want to be okay living a full life.
right.
And that is also inspired by them. So for me, it's not the either or, it's actually both. So that it's about grieving resourcefully, so people can grieve in their own way, and that they remember their loved ones even more, and that they have spontaneous memories, but in a way that mostly kind of make them feel a bit bittersweet, or that they get a warm smile when they remember the fun stuff that they did together. Instead of when people get stuck in the most painful parts of grief, they mostly just remember the last moments. They
Oh,
remember the last weeks where the person was very, very unwell. They remember the last moment. They remember those things
the
and
phone
those
call.
memories. Exactly.
Oh, right.
Right. Yeah. They just get in the way because that memory then is front and center, and they can't remember all of the good bits.
Right. So when you reframe the languaging, I guess, what's a good, I'm trying to think of a good way to, instead of accept and move on, it's like you
It's
remember and,
it's remembering. For me, it is moving forward
hmm,
with their loved one still in it, with having a sense of connection, um, and also living a life that is then inspired by everything that you had shared.
oh, that's good.
Yeah.
And of
So
course, I keep drawing on my grandfather's memory. I'm like, yeah, that's really good.
yeah,
because I know that he does actually inspire a lot of what I do and how I am, and so interesting.
Yeah.
And do you find that uh, some people just can't move, or they're just so stuck, or have you ever had anyone not be able to?
Um, I always ask whether it would be appropriate for them and
Oh,
how much change would be appropriate for them now.
right. You mean the
And
subconscious, you ask?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. And there always are objections. There always are. And I think because if there weren't any objections, the person wouldn't be stuck.
True.
So it very much is about finding those unconscious objections. And because, of course, our logical conscious minds, they're just very logical. And it's very, very simple. Our subconscious minds are those things that when somebody gives you well-meaning advice, and on the outside you're nodding and smiling and saying, "Oh yeah, that seems like a good idea," and on the inside everything is screaming, "Hell no, I'm not going to do that. No way." Oh, that's your subconscious, and that moment in time is a subconscious objection. And then I want to know what is going on at that moment in time subconsciously that makes the person react that way.
And you have to be aware enough to know, like, to hear the voices in your, I'm going to call them the voices in your head. I have lots of them. Because it's true that we all have this dialogue going on in the background, and half the
Yeah.
time I think we don't pay attention to it. We just think, "Oh, this is just the way it is."
Yes.
Oh my gosh, right? And I was actually, you just made me think of something recently. I saw a headline, because we're talking about, not wanting to give up the grief, because partly, I guess, because it's tied to the memory of the person. But I didn't read the whole article, I will admit, something recently of how we are hardwired for negativity.
Mm.
And this was talking about, you know, it was talking a bit about how the media has gone all sensationalism, and how we're so quick to attack and see the bad side of things and tear people down. But it was something to do with, it's a bit of a survival mechanism, that we're hardwired on this negative feedback loop. And I wonder if that's something that got hardwired into our subconscious somehow. Hardwired. Nothing's hardwired. It's all software.
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean?
It's all changeable.
Yes. But it's interesting that we have a tendency towards that
Of course.
without an awareness it doesn't have to be that way.
Mm. Well, and I think at that moment in time, because the subconscious job is just to protect you and to keep us safe, right? And of course, it's trying to do that in the best way it can. And by holding on to those painful last memories, it just really feels like it is protecting us because it's the last thing that still connects us with the person. So that's why the subconscious is so desperately hanging on to it. And I think then it can be easy to really go into looking for all the stuff that isn't working. Instead of looking for that one little, and there is a lot. I mean, when we think about like somebody losing their partner of a lifetime, they have to relearn life. They
Mhm.
have to, that's why there's also so much anxiety or overwhelm in grief as well, is because people just actually don't know how to do that. Yeah. So because in traditional, he's in charge of this, that, and the other, and she's in charge of that. And if they both can't really do life without each other because they're such a good team.
Even in non-traditional, I mean,
Yeah.
my mind just went to, I would have to learn how to cook.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh
Yes.
my gosh. I could see the pizza boxes stacking up as we speak. It's true. It's true. You have, I mean, in life, you have a partnership for companionship, but it also just makes life easier in some
Exactly.
ways, you know? You share and share everything.
Yes.
The work and the fun. Right?
Absolutely. Exactly. Right. So, yeah.
And I know the subconscious is always, it has learned its, or no, I don't know. I have come to understand that the subconscious is always doing its best to protect you with what it knows or has learned. And it seems to be always on the lookout of, oh, that's too dangerous to fill in the blank.
Yes.
It's too dangerous to go pet that dog. It's too dangerous to be happy right now because right around the corner something bad will come.
Something bad.
Right? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So when you're working with people, I guess you do work one-on-one with people, but you
Mhm.
also mentioned, so did you use your membership like a self? They go in and do their own thing, or do they gather as a group, or?
So yeah, so I've got two options. One is the one-on-one, and I work with people online all over the world, which is great. And I also have got a membership, and that membership is at first I kind of wanted to start it really as a journey, start here, then do this, then do that. But of course I realized that wouldn't work because everybody is grieving in a very different way. And for some people, their sense of remorse or regret or guilt, or I should have done this, or I should have said that, is like the biggest problem. So then they got to start there. For other people, they're just so overwhelmed and just in so much anxiety, they can't even function. So then they got to start with grief and anxiety. For other people, the biggest thing is that they, as you, their beautiful term that I will steal from now on, they've become emotionally incontinent.
You can use it. Go ahead.
Thank you. I could just see the pod in the membership popping up. Emotional incontinency. And they're just really struggling with, getting those massive waves of grief in aisle 12 of the supermarket or in a meeting, in a business meeting and things like that. So they got to start there.
Right.
And it is very much self-paced. But there also are group coaching and group hypnotherapy sessions there in the membership as well. And the beauty of it also is that people really start supporting each other in that membership.
Nice.
So there's a group, a closed group where people hang out and ask for advice. And because I work in the membership portal and I also work one-on-one with clients, sometimes it takes me, a day to get back to people. And by the time I get back to it, I see there's already 5 comments on it.
Oh, that's very good. Yeah.
So that is just beautiful.
I mean, we are a community-driven species, right? And we've just experienced a whole long period of where they told us we weren't allowed to. So
Yes.
we thought, okay, great. I didn't want to talk to people anyway. But then we thought, oh no, actually, I do want to talk to people.
Yes, we do.
I really do. And you made me just remember when you were talking about where people enter it differently. So I remember this whole stages of grief, like that they say people go through.
Oh, God.
I know. But I wanted to ask you your opinion of, because I know you have a different view. You can be honest. You can even drop an F-bomb if you want. But
Thank you.
Yeah, go to town. Tell me your honest opinion of that traditional. I can't even remember what they all are.
The 5 stages.
The 5.
Okay.
Oh, there's 5. Yes, I couldn't
There's
even
5.
remember how many there were.
So the traditional grief model is the 5 stages of grief, which was the original work was done by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Okay.
And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was a Swiss-American psychotherapist, I think. And she did groundbreaking work for the terminally ill. Because back in the 50s, these people were just shoved back in some corner of the hospital. There was no cure for them. There was nothing we could do for them. They were too sick to be sent home. So we just kind of got to look after them and feed them.
Right.
And so she went in and she interviewed all of these people, what they wished for, what they hoped for. And she came up with those 5 stages. Mm-hmm. And so denial, depression, bargaining, there was something else. And
there's anger in there somewhere.
Anger, yes. There's anger in there. Well, yeah, thank you.
And acceptance.
And acceptance is the last one. And apparently everybody gets to acceptance just before they die, accepting that they're going to die. And some people do that a couple of weeks before they die. Some people do that half a second before they pass. And that was the groundbreaking work. And I absolutely believe that there is some merit with this. When people get a terminal diagnosis, they quite often go into denial. It's not happening. They go into bargaining, or I'm just going to, I don't know, drink juice now for the next 6 months. And that's some kind of bargaining, really. Or they go, oh, I'm going to go and do whatever, silent retreat if you save me, all these kind of things. And so, yeah, I think there's some merit to that. But then they took exactly the same model and put it onto grief and grieving. And that was way too much round peg in a square hole. It just didn't fit at all. Because
you're not on your deathbed. So why do I have to accept it?
Exactly. Right. And also there's just so much more to grieving than 5 neat stages. Nature doesn't work that way. Nature is messy. Grief is so messy. And then I get so many people who kind of go, oh, I thought I was doing grief wrong. No.
There's no test at the end. You do it. You do you. I'm sorry to laugh, but it is a bit comical.
It is, isn't it? And they just get so much relief when I explain to them why the 5 stages of grief don't work, and why, anxiety, overwhelm, remorse, regret, guilt, anguish, they're not part of the 5 stages model. Right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
That's why there's just so much more to grief. So, and that's my, and it doesn't take into account the subconscious processes at all. It is just way too logical.
Right. Well, you can't make a system if you don't have logic. So when we tried, being one of those logical types, former financial executive, I'll hold my hand up. I have a tendency to try to make, things look nice in lines and columns, but life isn't really that way at all. You can pretend that it is for a little while, and then you curse when things go outside the lines.
Yes.
And mess everything up. Or you just say, okay, and you just keep on keeping on. It's like I'm from British descent. Keep calm and carry on. So,
yes. Very much.
Right? That's why they drink so much beer. Because they didn't take their time to stop and go, hold on a minute, I'm upset. Let's do something about that. Do you find that people stay in your groups, or do they kind of come and...
Yeah, they come and go, but the duration is very different. Also, the duration when I work with people one-on-one is very different. But usually, like with my one-on-one work, for example, in the beginning, we do the first 3 sessions is usually 1 a week. And then we kind of space it out to 1 every 2 weeks. And I'm currently working with a lady, and I just see her every 6 weeks. And then I got an email from her last week, and she said, I'm going so great. Can we just postpone my next session for another 4 weeks? Because I'm going great and I'm really busy. And I love that. Because that she's really busy, that means that she's living life again.
She's graduated.
Yeah, she said that's just beautiful, right? So and with the memberships, people also stay in because now they are realizing that they are becoming a beacon of hope for others.
Oh, that's nice.
So, because one of the biggest questions in the beginning always is how long does this last? Does it ever get better? All these kind of things. And the great irony of me getting on my little soapbox here about the 5 stages, and then I have created a roadmap through grief, which has got a lot more points to it. But I can see the irony of it. But I just call it a roadmap because I had to call it something. And of course, there's a gazillion squiggly lines that go from here to there, back down to the bottom, all the way back to the beginning, and then there's dead end roads everywhere and all those kind of things.
It's like
But
a
it just
create your own adventure book.
yes, yes, exactly. But what it does do is it warns people of things that are going to happen, because I think nobody tells you that your circle of friends will massively change,
Right.
because some people just can't deal with it. They just don't know what to say, how to be, and they just don't know, to no fault of their own, because they just haven't done grief yet, so they can't really know. But that other people will kind of all of a sudden, that may have been on the fringes, all of a sudden will step up and become new friends. So that's just one of those things on the roadmap, to warn people, isn't like there's nothing wrong with you. It's okay. These
And
things
that
happen.
is like that's something I never would have thought of. So there's until you go through it, I guess you've got to depend on the wisdom of the people who went before you, hopefully. And
Yeah.
it's and the length of time it takes. I was just asking that because what I realized was it was 2 years before I realized that I was stuck, and I went for assistance, and it took me 2 years
Yeah.
to process it
Yes.
with the help of my hypnotherapist, therapist his name's Donald. I'm like, Donald, what the hell? One day I said to him, what? Yes, I'm going to say what? I said, what the hell? He said, there's layers. I'm like, how many goddamn layers are there?
Yeah.
Had a bit of a temper
done so
tantrum.
many layers.
Right? So
Yeah.
there's am I a cake or an onion? I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. You know, I see it. I was always kind of thinking about the onion thing, but I've decided it's a fern.
Oh, I like that even better.
Where always there's a new leaf that kind of comes out, a beautiful light green leaf that comes out and slowly unfurls and uncurls.
And there's all the little fronds. I could see that.
Yes. I
That's a
think
much
that's
better
more.
visual than an onion.
I think that's much more human.
Right? Yeah. When I'm teaching yoga, I remind people you're not digital. It's not this and this. It's like you are 3D.
Yes.
So you got to find your 3D way into poses, not your 2D way into poses.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's oh my God, life is so interesting, isn't it? I mean,
It is fascinating.
the more that I talk to people, and the more things that I see, and the more things that I learn, the more I think, holy moly, I don't know anything.
Yeah. And with that time thing that you did, I had somebody. She did her first session with me last week, and online, her daughter had passed away 6 years ago.
Oh.
And she said, because I always ask why me, or why now? And she said, I've been following you for all this time. And I always knew that when the time was right, I was going to come and work with you.
That's amazing.
It's like, okay.
Right.
And yeah, now the time is right.
And that's also an amazing segue. Where do people follow you?
Oh, thanks.
It's like, wow, you're a magician. How did you do that?
Totally. So people can follow me on grieftolove.com.
Okay, so website.
grieftolove.com. Also, my on Facebook, I'm Grief to Love. On Insta, I'm Grief to Love. I don't really do much on Insta. And on Facebook, I also have got a free group with a lot of content in there. And that is Grief to Love Circle.
Oh, nice. Where they can start to sample.
Yes, absolutely.
For when they're ready.
So and I love the word circle, because it just, makes people feel welcome. So it's a Grief to Love circle.
That's an excellent word. You're making me think about my wording of things. I might steal your words.
That's fine too.
That's amazing, right? We'll trade. We'll do tradesies. So, oh my gosh. So, I mean, everyone in the world at some point, if they have not been touched yet, are touched by grief. So that's why I think this is a really important topic. And I think even the past few years, more probably it came upon faster than people were ready for some people, like very unexpectedly, things were crashing down around them. So, with all that in mind, not that no pressure or anything, but what do you have as some words of wisdom for people? Like a final deep thoughts, Jack Handy's deep thoughts. Okay, you don't have to be funny, but
So I think that is so important to be aware that at some stage we will all be touched by grief. And the important thing then is to know that there is hope, that it is possible to feel like you still have a connection with your loved one, that you can live life in a way that honors them and that is very much inspired by them as well, so that they still live on within you and through your actions and through what it is that you do. And that is, in my experience, a much better way of honoring them than to become stuck in the most painful parts of grief. And I mean, I was working with a young woman, and she came to me for grief, and she told me that she'd lost her mum, only that her mum was still alive. I was like, how did that work?
Whoa.
And she said, well, 4 years ago, my grandma died, and that day I lost my mum.
Oh.
Because she said, no matter what I tell my mum, she's having drama with a boyfriend. And mum goes, oh, yeah, that's really sad, but it's not as sad as when my mum died. And she said, I can't talk to my mum anymore. She's gone. She's just completely stuck in the most painful parts of grief. And that to me is a real tragedy. Yes, it's really sad that one life is lost, but it's a massive tragedy when the second life is lost to the grief. So, and it's not doing anybody any good.
No, no, not at all. And my mind just went to the person who passed away that you were missing. How would they want you to be for the rest of your life? If that's what you need to get you moving to the the grief, to call Silke and say, help me, right?
Yeah.
So
and it really
true.
is about honoring them, and when you think about it, it's a bit like the way I work, and I know the analogy is not quite right, but it's the closest I can come up with, is when you think about maybe a childhood friend, and you would climb trees together, or you do fun things together, and when you don't even know their surname because you were just kids, and you've got no idea what happened to them, but when you think about them, you get a warm feeling and you get a smile on your face. Right? And ideally, that's the way that we also want to remember our deceived loved ones, where we remember them and go, oh, yeah, oh, there was that. Or we might be driving and we see a sign and it reminds us of something that we did with them 17 years ago that we hadn't thought of it in a long time. Those spontaneous memories. And that's what happens when we grieve resourcefully. That
is outstanding. I think that's the best way to remember someone, is those like, oh yeah, moments. That's really good. I store mine all the way in a folder in my head and I pull them out now and again.
Yes.
Right?
Of course.
Yeah. That's my logical brain thinks that I have filing cabinets in my head.
Neatly sorted.
Yes, of course. Of course. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for sharing that, all of your knowledge and information. And I really do encourage people to really spend some quiet time with yourself and see if there's somewhere where you need some help, right? Like,
Mm.
it's not a sign of weakness to grieve. Like, not
Oh,
at all. Not at all, right?
it's a sign of
And
strength.
and and I think it's important. It's an important thing that we tend to, because we live in Pleasantville, we tend to try to gloss over the unhappy side of things. So be okay with being unhappy when you're unhappy, but don't get stuck there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for spending time with me. I know it's early where you are, so I know you had to get up early for this.
Oh, no, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so, so much for having me, Heather.
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely. So, my friends, if you need some help, you know what to do. All of the information is in the show notes. Reach out and don't suffer silently. Get some help. Have some conversations. Even
Yes.
just like say hi. Just reach out and say hi. And we're all here to help you. Have an amazing week, my friends, and keep taking care of yourself. And I will see you again next time. Take care. Hi, my friend. Thanks so much for listening to this entire podcast. If you found it useful and you're like me and you like helping others, please feel free to share this. Just give it a like, give it a comment. If you found something useful in it, there's a chance that someone else will find something useful as well. Also, if you have any questions at all, I can absolutely help, and I would love to help. You can email me at heather@prosperityflowcoaching.com. If you want more of this awesome content, you can follow me on Instagram, Heather Stewart Coaching. You can follow me on Facebook, Prosperity Flow Coaching. And I have a personal request. I want to help as many people as I can with these podcasts. And if you could give me a review, hopefully a good one, if you could share, if you could send this out into the world, I would truly appreciate it. I hope you have an amazing day, and I hope that you find your way to wellness by getting back to me. Take care, my friend.